Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to wait a few seconds for people to join this webinar. As we wait for them, please hold on, and we're going to have a very interesting and lively conversation today. Thank you. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining this webinar, 5 Reasons to Replace Citrix ADC with Kemp. My name is Frank Yu. I'm the Principal Application Experience Architect with Kemp, and I'm here to tell you about some great things about load balancing, ADC, what is an ADC, and how Citrix compares to something that Kemp has. A couple housekeeping things. Don't forget, in this Bright Talk session, we are live right now. And if you have any questions, please go to the Q&A section. Please enter your questions, and I'll be more than happy to review them and do a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. Also, don't forget that this will be on demand, and we will be able to talk about this and see this later on demand afterwards. So anyways, let's get into this presentation. So 5 reasons to replace Citrix ADC with Kemp. This is really a good question, I think, for a lot of people, because you want to look at different vendors, you want to look at different technologies, you want to see what's going on in terms of what solutions you want to use and what solutions are available for you in terms of your IT infrastructure and life in general. You want to look at you want choices and understand the difference between the choices. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about load balancing overall. What is load balancing, the technology? What are we discussing in this presentation? What are we discussing in terms of this IT architecture? Then I want to go a little bit about Citrix, talk about Citrix, who they are, what they are, and talk about whether Citrix is the right load balancing solution, what it means for Citrix, what it means for you and Kemp, and obviously then tie it all together and come to a conclusion. So let's get into the meat of this presentation. And let's talk about load balancing. What is load balancing? This is an important question because if you ask different people, I think you're going to get different answers in terms of what load balancing is. And load balancing, historically, we look at this thing called Application Delivery Controller, ADC, and load balancers. Load balancers were first introduced into the internet in IT in the mid-late 90s. The first vendor released product was actually Cisco's Local Director in 1997. And it was because during this internet boom, application servers needed to get bigger and faster and more available. People were starting to jump onto this thing called the World Wide Web. And we needed some sort of technology to bring it all together and make sure that it was always available and accessible. And load balancers were really designed to do this. And then load balancers started adding more features and functions and more capabilities because they were this reverse proxy doing these cool things. And so we started adding more functions like web application firewall, authentication, VPN, network firewall. And the analysts decided that, you know what? It's not really a load balancer anymore because it's doing more than load balancing. We need to call it something else. So they came up with the term Application Delivery Controller, ADC. It's a confusing term. It's not necessarily the most popular term. So the general way to think of it for me is that an ADC is kind of like a fancy load balancer. It's a load balancer with bells and whistles to do all these other cool things. But you know what? The funny thing is, even though we added all this great functionality and all these extra features, most of the time when a customer or a business is looking for some sort of technology that needs this concept of an ADC, application delivery controller, really and truly, they're going back to the core functionality that we introduced at the beginning of a load balancer: application availability, scalability, etc. And this is important because for us to consider as we move forward, because our networks are evolving. The networks are very different today, excuse me, than they were in the 1990s and the early 2000s. We have this virtualization, we have cloud, all these great things that we're doing, and we're using that to enable this thing called digital transformation, using technology to advance and change our business models to make them better. And load balancing is a key technology for this digital transformation. And what do I mean by that? I mean, first, let's look at the load balancing fundamentals. What is the load balancer doing? The load balancer is first doing this thing called server load balancing, SLB. It is a reverse proxy that manages these pools of servers. In other words, there's these application servers sitting behind this load balancer, and the client is then directed to the load balancer, and the load balancer then directs or redirects the traffic to specific instances of the servers. It does this based on health checks, distribution algorithms, and other things to make sure that clients get to an application server that makes sense and is available. Then there's this concept of global server load balancing, GSLB. It's different, but it has the same functional concept. So it's based on DNS. It actually manipulates DNS. It's kind of like active or dynamic DNS, where it checks the sites for the availability of multiple sites for availability. And when the client goes to get access to an application, it sends out a DNS request. And then the global server load balancer will hand out the DNS response based on what's best available for the client. And if the site goes down, it will not hand out that DNS response. So it's similar at the application level, but now it's doing it through DNS. So server load balancing and global server load balancing, this SLB and GSLB, are the core components of load balancing. And this is important for us to keep in mind as we move forward through this discussion. These are the core things for load balancing that we want to talk about. So this digital transformation, cloud, virtualization, we even talk about containers and microservices. Why are we doing all these things? Why are we leveraging and moving things to the cloud? Why are we doing all this virtualization, the software-defined data center, SDDC, and these other things when it takes effort? It takes effort for us to do. It takes more skills. So we're putting something into the pie. What are we getting out of it? And the key things are, number one, we're getting scalability. We get the ability to grow on demand. So if I'm an e-commerce site, and here in the US, where I'm based, we have this big holiday coming up, Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is known as much for the holiday Thanksgiving as it is the day after and the couple days after that, where we have now Black Friday. E-commerce and commerce, Black Friday is where everybody goes out shopping and everything is on sale. So you have the surge of traffic going to the stores. And it's not just brick and mortar, because now we have Black Friday. We also then created this concept of Cyber Monday. So the e-commerce businesses decided to get in on this game and create this Cyber Monday, where you have all these online deals on Monday to go out and shopping. Go out virtually. I can sit at my desk and do it. And to scale now, you might have traditionally, a dozen, 100, I don't know how big your business is, customers coming into your site every day. And then you have this big event on Cyber Monday, and now you have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of customers coming to your site to buy things. And you need to scale the server infrastructure appropriately. You don't want to have all that equipment and all those resources available 24/7, 365. You only want to use it when you need it. So you need that scalability, and this cloud and virtualization gives us the flexibility to be able to create that scalability on demand quickly and easily and take it away. Availability. This is important, obviously. You want to make sure the site's always there. So when a client tries to go to the site, they go to a functioning component. If the component is not functioning, if the instance of the application server or something is not working, then the load balancer detects that through its health checking mechanisms and says, do not send them to this bad location. Send them to a good location for the instance of that application. Availability is critical not only at the application server level, but also at the site level with that GSLB functionality. So disaster recovery, active sites can be done with the load balancing technology. And last, we want agility. This concept of digital transformation means that we need to turn on a dime. We need to be able to change things very quickly and easily. And the flexibility of these virtual environments gives us the ability to change our colors, change our applications, update things quickly and easily. And this is very important for us also. So cloud virtualization, digital transformation, we want load balancing. Load balancing is a great technology. It is essential. So let's look at these load balancing / ADC vendors. And we're going to look at Citrix ADC, Citrix Application Delivery Controller. You can see here in this slide, before I move to the next slide, it says Netscaler, and we struck it out because that's what Citrix did. And we'll explain what I mean there. So a little bit about Citrix. Citrix is a large vendor in the IT industry. Their revenue in 2019 was just over $3 billion. They're based in Fort Lauderdale and Santa Clara, California. They have dual headquarters, 8,000-ish employees, plus or minus. But the key things I want you to understand here is that their product portfolio is very broad. They have this thing called Citrix Workspace, which is probably what you know Citrix for. Citrix Workspace includes their what they call apps and virtualization component for their VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, for their hypervisor, what they used to call Zen Desktop, and Zen Server is now part of Workspace. They also have other components like SD-WAN. They have the ADC, which is the load balancer piece. And they have some other components as well in terms of their portfolio. Citrix ADC is the load balancer component. They acquired this technology in 2005 from a company called Netscaler. They kept the Netscaler brand up to a couple years ago. 2018, they got rid of the Netscaler brand name and renamed it to Citrix ADC. Most of the people that I talk to and know about know it as Netscaler, but the Citrix ADC is the name brand, the brand that Citrix uses moving forward. So looking at real quick at the chart on the right, you can see that Citrix ADC, and you can see the basic feature sets, load balancing feature sets that I have here in this chart. And I shrunk it down to get rid of some of the extra items to make things easier. And you can see they have different versions, standard, advanced, and premium edition that have more features, but the core functionality is available in at least the advanced edition, because when I say core, I include the global server load balancing, and I want that blacked out on the global server load balancing. And they have other pieces as well, but they are a fully functional load balancing technology, and of course they do other pieces as well. So for the platforms, Citrix ADC platforms, you have these different flavors. Number one, you have hardware. You have the hardware, and it's labeled as MPX or SDX. So the product name MPX and the part number, like the 8905, or SDX, refer to the hardware platforms. MPX versus SDX means whether you're doing individual instance or if you're doing multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy, having multiple instances within the same piece of hardware. So pseudo virtualization. VPX is their virtual version. So if you download the software for their ADC, it's going to be labeled VPX as their name. They have public cloud options. So they're in the marketplaces in these public clouds like Amazon and Azure, as well as they do bring your own license with their VPX software into the public clouds. And they also have a container version, which they call CPX. It's a what I'm going to call a light version, LITE version of their software, designed for a container environment such as a Docker container platform. When I say light, it means that they have done things to reduce and change things in terms of the capabilities to get the form factor to fit within the container environment and make it sure it kind of works right in a container environment. But there are a lot of nuances with containers and doing load balancing within containers and microservices. So it's kind of a class of itself. But again, the general platforms available for Citrix: hardware, virtual software. Traditionally, it was hardware based on the original platform that Netscaler produced in 2005, but virtual software and the public clouds, and then also this container version. So now let's talk about Citrix ADC, the Citrix ADC / Netscaler, and what's not quite right about what you may be looking at if you're an end user or if you're a partner and you're looking for a load balancing technology to incorporate into your solution. What does Citrix ADC miss in terms of making things right for your solution? And number one, and I kind of alluded to this in the previous slides in this previous conversation, is that there's a lack of focus. Citrix is a large company that is known a lot more for their server virtualization and VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure. They have this Citrix workspace. What used to be called Zen App and Zen Desktop, they made this name change in 2018 also. It has now become Citrix App and Desktop. And Zen Server, which was their hypervisor, became Citrix Hypervisor. So most of the IT community knows Citrix for Citrix Workspace. Excuse me. This VDI hypervisor virtualization technology. And then these other components, such as the Citrix ADC / Netscaler, has really become something to support this virtualization infrastructure and technology. So ultimately, the Citrix ADC is the supporting player for the rest of Citrix's portfolio. I always like to say, I'm a comic book fan. You're always the sidekick and you're never the hero. You are supporting the main character. In this case, the server virtualization VDI, the Citrix workspace. But you're never coming out to the front and taking that starring role. This is how Citrix kind of deals with the Netscaler product. It's designed to be a component and a key component, or at least they say, for these different environments. But we'll learn that, you know what? It doesn't have to be Citrix for these other components also. Number two, ease of use. And here I'm going to go to a partner who has said some very interesting things, and these are coming from the partner themselves. This is from Fortum IT, based in the UK. And he said, as a certified Citrix engineer, my experience of Citrix Netscaler has changed over the years. And he doesn't say this in a positive light necessarily. He's saying that the experience has changed to the point where Citrix Netscaler, it's becoming an effort. And here's more details in his quote. Anybody who deploys Citrix Netscaler will know how much time and planning and effort is needed. In other words, it takes a lot of effort to look at the configuration and planning for the Citrix Netscaler. It is not easy to use. It's not easy to configure. It takes days. Somebody needs to be competent. That means we need to have technicians that are trained to be able to understand the Citrix Netscaler technology, because it has gotten fairly complicated over the years. Over the years, since the acquisition, since prior to that, Netscaler was in business for quite a few years, the technology has really evolved into this big, complex thing that's becoming harder and harder to configure, manage, and deal with operationally. And especially, you can see here, this quote is fairly recent, at least within this year, 2020. And as we know, 2020 has been a very interesting year for us, and all these different things, including this pandemic, that is creating a lot of pressures and burdens for us from an IT perspective, because everybody is now working from home. We need to enable these resources and change these IT technologies and build these architectures to support this work from home concept for our businesses. It just makes it harder for people to deal with those changes and dealing with this work from home virtual concept when you have to deal with these very complicated and kind of niche technologies such as load balancing and the Citrix ADC. So overall, it's complicated. It requires formal training. And if you don't have formal training, expect to take a lot of time to go through the manuals and go through and figure out what works and what doesn't work, and to break fix. You know how it goes when you try to put something together without a good knowledge of how things go. It doesn't go exactly great. And it takes planning time and effort. It takes significant time and effort to put this together. And you'll see, as we discuss, comparisons like with Kemp, where it takes hours, half a day from start to finish, versus days, weeks, months, as you could see with Citrix. Reason number 3, this really starts tying these things, reasons kind of start tying into each other, is customer satisfaction. And here what I've shown is Gartner. Gartner is one of the leading, if not the leading, IT analyst firm. And they have this customer review process called Peer Insights, where the customers provide reviews to Gartner. And Gartner then certifies them through the partner, with the customer, to make sure, yes, it was a customer. It was not the vendor that is just posting things like Yelp reviews and Amazon reviews, where we know half of them tend to be coming from the vendor themselves. That doesn't happen here. So we have Gartner Peer Insights, and I took the screenshot on the screen on the right-hand side. I did this yesterday to try to make it current. Kemp 200 plus ratings, 220 odd ratings, rating 4.9 out of 5 stars. And here we have Citrix, and I had to cut and paste this together. So I apologize if it's not truly a screenshot. And the reason I had to cut and paste it, because the Citrix section was several page folds down below other vendors and other choices in terms of ADCs when you're comparing ADCs and load balancers on the Citrix site, because they only have 6 ratings. And of that, their rating is not as high. So it's important to trust the peer reviews when you can get unbiased peer reviews through an unbiased source. And I believe Gartner is one of the best unbiased sources out there. And of course, there are other review sites that you can go to that I would certainly recommend that you look at things for. So when we go through the customer satisfaction, look for customers within your vertical, for environments like yours, and see if it makes sense. Reason number 4 is support. Kemp, and I'll talk about Kemp real quick, because really I want to focus on the Citrix piece. At Kemp, our customer support is world-class, global support structure. We have a 99% satisfaction rating. We have a real-time rating actually on our support site to show our customer satisfaction rating. And at Kemp, we're focused on load balancing. We are a load balancing vendor. We focus on load balancing technology. And therefore, our support infrastructure, our support team, our support engineers, who I love, are knowledgeable from the very beginning. They are load balancing experts. The first person you talk to on the phone, or through the web, or through a chat, or anything else. Citrix, again, you can see these things start coming together and reasons start overlapping a bit. ADC, Citrix ADC is not their primary product. And I can say that, but there's actually facts behind it. If you look at their revenue, their networking revenue, which includes ADC, but it's not only ADC. There's other pieces like SD-WAN, VPN, other pieces that are part of their networking revenue. Is about 22% of their total revenue. And interestingly, it's decreasing year over year. I think according to their latest quarterly statement, Q3 2020, it was decreasing by about 10% year over year. 10% plus minus. Don't quote me on that. Go back to Citrix's 10Q earnings report to get those facts. But networking revenue is a small piece of Citrix's product portfolio. And that translates to these other things where, number one, there's a combined support structure. So I'm not saying that they only have one support center that you call into in one location. They have multiple locations. But when you call into their support center, the support center is supporting all their products, Citrix Workspace. So that VDI, the Zen virtualization, the SD-WAN, the firewall technology, security technology. So all those pieces going to one place, and then they have to triage it to the right experts. And as we see, is not necessarily the key technology that they're focusing on. And their product development also then maybe, and when I say product development, I'm not only just talking about product development in terms of features, because it is a small piece, subset of their product portfolio, but also talking about the stability. So there may or may not be stability problems, and there have been in the past, there have been issues, and I'm not going to say that, yeah, this is because of, but there is a correlation in terms of stability, in terms of issues with the product versus, what they're doing. And this all translates ultimately to a lack of responsiveness potentially. So is the company willing to support you and the product at the rate that you want when it's not necessarily the primary component for themselves? And reason number 5, Citrix is expensive. Here I'm doing a comparison. Here I have the Kemp LMX15 product, is a hardware model, throughput 15 gigs, SSL transactions per second, or TLS, if I'm using the current terminology. It's around 12,000 per second. Concurrent connections, 35 million concurrent connections. A Citrix somewhat equivalent product, the MPX 8905, throughput 5 gigs, 1/3 of the throughput. SSL TPS 8000, so about 75% of the throughput, 70% of the throughput. Current connections, they don't actually list it, but from the specs that I see, it's probably around the same number. Now the pricing, list price, Kemp $9,800 US. Citrix, and this is for the Platinum product, which includes other features, is ballpark just under $44,000 US. And you might come back to me and say, you know what, that's not apples to apples. What about the Citrix Basic pricing? Basic pricing is around $21,000, $22,000 US. So it's still significantly higher. So you're getting less performance at a much higher price. In this case, I'm seeing about 200% increased performance with the Kemp at about 78% of the price. So there is a big price performance disparity between Kemp and Citrix. And this is generally going to hold true, not at these ratios, but at a significant ratio in all instances across all Kemp and Citrix product lines in their portfolios. Full comparison guide, you can see I have a website listed there where you can get the full comparison information. And I certainly recommend that you go and browse at your leisure. So let's talk a little bit about why Kemp. Why is Kemp then the solution? Or I'm not going to say the solution, but a solution that you should look at. And I think there are several reasons that we talk about. And let's talk about first this Kemp's mission statement is Kemp powers the always-on application experience that enterprises and service providers need to succeed. We're focused on load balancing technology that makes your applications available. This is our company's DNA. We want to make sure your applications are providing the experience in terms of availability, scalability, agility through load balancing technologies and other ancillary technologies to make sure that your application experience is always there. How do we do that? Number one, we want to make simple and easy to use products. We simplify the deployment options. So we make the products in terms of hardware, software, virtual, public cloud, similar to Citrix. And more importantly, our products are based on a common software core platform. So it's software based, and then we put it into these different form factors. If you're buying hardware from us, really and truly, you're buying hardware that we have pre-designed to make the cost efficient to deliver to you based on the same software package. Flexible licensing. We want to give you the most flexible way to consume this technology. Whether it's perpetual licenses, which is the traditional model where you buy the product, you buy the license, you have it for your life, you buy your support plan with it. We also have pooled licensing. We have subscription licensing where you can pay annually, which is like a leasing model. And we have this really cool thing that I'll talk about called meter licensing, which is consumption-based licensing. Unmatched value and cost savings. We just talked a bit about this in reason 5. Where you're getting much better performance for the dollar when you compare against Citrix and other vendors like F5, where Kemp is designed to be focused on the technology you require, and therefore that translates in terms of performance, efficiency, in other words, and in cost for that performance, because we do not build all these other cost centers into this product that are unrelated to the product. And of course, I mentioned it earlier, this world-class technical support. We have a global support organization, 99% customer satisfaction, that is really designed to be popular and very reactive and responsive to you in terms of customer needs. Kemp has professional services to migrate you from Citrix to Kemp. We will, if you're a current Citrix customer, we can help migrate your existing Citrix ADC Netscaler platform for whatever applications you have. We have application templates if you want to do it on your own to make the migration easy to configure these applications, including applications like Citrix Workspace. So Citrix Workspace app and desktop for VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure. I mentioned earlier that this is something that Citrix wants to tie into the Netscaler ADC platform. So to require the ADC to load balance and to support the Citrix VDI infrastructure. And it has a component called Citrix Storefront, which is the front end for the internet access to this VDI infrastructure. Of course, Citrix is going to tell you use the Citrix product. But you know what? Kemp can do it too. Kemp can support Citrix Storefront and provide that front end for the authentication and the availability and scalability with that load balancing technology for Citrix Storefront and VDI infrastructure. So you don't have to stay with the Citrix vendor for all the components within the solution. Buy best of breed. Buy the piece that makes sense. And of course, you can see here all these other applications that are supported by Kemp through application templates. And of course, if there's not a template, if you have a custom application, that can be supported as well. Any application on the internet can be load balanced. Excuse me. So we have the industry's most flexible load balancing options, where we have the virtual load balancers, software load balancing that can be run on common hypervisors, whether it's the Citrix hypervisor, formerly called Zen, or Hyper-V, KVM, VMware. We can run on those common hypervisors. If you want to run on bare metal, we can actually run on bare metal as well. We support load balancing in the cloud. So your Amazon, AWS, your Azure, Microsoft. We support through the marketplace or the bring your own license, where you can take our virtual load balancers and put them into the cloud. And of course, we have our hardware load balancers. We have high performance hardware availability, so that you can purchase the hardware and get a great value in terms of the performance you're getting through the hardware selections that we have available. So you can mix and match, but the really cool thing here is that the software, the functionality, the look and feel, the user interface, the management is all the same. The only difference is the form factor that it's been installed in. So I mentioned earlier this thing called meter licensing. It's really cool. So we have these various licensing models. Like I mentioned, we have the perpetual license, where you pay for the license, you get it for life, and then you pay for your support, which is your traditional IT, CapEx, OpEx purchasing model. We also have pooled licenses, where you can buy this pool of throughput, and then you can divvy out the throughput for the licenses based on where you deploy them. And we have these subscription base, where you can buy the license on a time basis. So you can buy it per year or even per month potentially. And you can buy the license like a lease, like you're leasing a car, and then at the end of the lease, you return the car to the vendor or to the dealer. And we have this thing called meter license. It's really cool because it's consumption based. This is what I like to think is like your electric meter on your house and the electric company, where I have all these devices in my house and I can add more or take them away at will. The electric company doesn't care. And I can have big things, small things, things running 24/7, things that are only running when I turn on the switch or turn off the switch. The electric company doesn't care. But what I get charged for is only the electricity that I use for the things that are turned on for what they actually use at that time. This is what this metered licensing is like. We actually monitor your instances of load balancing, how much load balancing they are using in terms of bandwidth, and you only get charged monthly for what you're actually consuming. Not for the potential what you think you need, but actually for the actual consumption. So it becomes very efficient, and if you do it right, it becomes very predictable as well, just like your electric bill for your house. It is a great model if you want that flexibility in these virtual environments, because now you are in control of how you deploy those load balancing licenses. So the key takeaways I have here for Kemp, we focus on supporting load balancing. We have a full feature set for load balancing, and of course, we have the ancillary technologies for that ADC application delivery controller if you really want, in terms of web application firewall, authentication for single sign-on, two-factor authentication. We focus on that load balancing technology because that's what's important. That's what we understand customers need. And by doing so, number one, we're keeping things simple to configure. Very easy. I can take someone that's non-technical, give them the deployment guide, give them the information, and they can probably get our load balancer configured for their environment within, say, half a day. If you're technically inclined, we're talking about hours, if that. And by doing so, we're going to give you a much better value for your money. This technology is really designed, and the way we build this technology is designed to give you optimal value for your performance, for your technical requirements, to fix your problems. And by focusing on this load balancing technology, Kemp really has world-class customer support and correspondingly top customer ratings through these third-party review sites. Citrix, they focus on their workspace technology. That's their key product in their product portfolio, is workspace, this virtualization technology. Citrix ADC has become very complicated. It does lots of different things. And these different things interact and get incorporated in technology that makes it complicated. It makes it hard to configure. Like I said from the person that I quoted earlier in the presentation, it takes a trained engineer to manage or to configure Citrix ADC, and it takes days to plan and deal with it. And correspondingly, again, Citrix now becomes expensive. It becomes expensive not just from the CapEx, from the initial purchase price, but it becomes expensive from the ongoing support costs because it is complicated. It is harder to manage. It becomes a little more expensive operationally as well. And Citrix is not rated from the customer ratings as we see as other vendors such as Kemp. So this becomes something to be concerned about. So ultimately, I'm biased in terms of how this works. Why Citrix? And choose Kemp. And you can choose Kemp today. You can download the trial software, and you can download it today, kemp.ax/try. You can read why customers switch from Citrix to Kemp, kemp.ax/binge/Citrix. You can go to that site. You can download the trial software. It comes with full support and access to our support organization. And if you have any other questions referring to this, you're more than happy to contact us at sales@kemp.ax, and we're more than happy to answer the questions that you have. So Kemp is available for you to try today. There's nothing that you have to jump through hoops or hurdles to get Kemp today. It is available. And I certainly recommend that you spend a little time and try it and see what's going on. So let's take a quick look as we go through this. Some of the questions that we have. I have a lot of questions here. So hopefully this has been a very useful content-wise. And I think it has been based on some of the questions that I see here. And let's start going through some of these key questions because we have some time. And number one, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this presentation. And I'll go ahead and pop out these slides so you can actually see me on the camera. So questions, and I'll start moving forward. And I have one person that it's not really a question, but so he says, quite interesting argument. Is a Nokia 6210 a better phone than an iPhone 12? And it's a funny argument because in a way, yes, because it does what it's designed to do. I have my iPhone here. There's my iPhone. And it's complicated. It takes time to learn, download the apps, figure everything out, go through the settings. There are manuals to understand how it works. But you know what? Back in the old days, I had this old Motorola StarTAC phone. I flip it open. I punch the numbers in. I call someone. Straightforward, very easy. Takes me seconds to understand how to use it. So depending upon your use case, it makes sense to have a tool that is tailored for what you need. Sometimes it's good to have a Swiss Army knife, but you know there are trade-offs on having that Swiss Army knife. The tools aren't designed specifically for what you want. And because they aren't specific for what you want, like the screwdriver that I'm showing here, or, motioning here, it may not fit properly, and you might have to do some jury rigging or things to make it work right. So, yeah, in some cases, it is better to have things that are simpler. So let's see what else that I have here. Can Loadmaster be used for several different app pools? For example, we're using Loadmaster for our Exchange servers. Can we use it additionally for other products in parallel, such as Citrix? Or do we need multiple instances of Loadmaster? So number one, let me clarify. Loadmaster is the product name for Kemp's load balancer. So it sounds like I'm happy that you are a Kemp customer, but the answer is absolutely. There's no reason that you need to have a specific instance of a load balancer for a specific application, and only for that application. You can host multiple applications. You can host your entire network environment on one load balancer or a pair of load balancers if you're doing high availability. Is it recommended? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on your network environment and your availability requirements. But yes, the answer to this is yes, you can use Loadmaster to load balance other things. So if you're using it for Exchange, you can also use it for your Citrix VDI, Citrix Storefront. You can also use it for your SAP, for your HR application, for anything else that you want. Absolutely. Let's see. Can Loadmaster also replace Microsoft load balancing in terminal services? Yes. So again, Loadmaster specific question, but I think it's relevant because we see a lot of things in terms of not just Citrix in Citrix VDI and VPN. But we also see things with a lot for Microsoft. So always on VPN, Microsoft remote desktop services, absolutely. Microsoft terminal services, absolutely is an internet application, can be load balanced. In fact, we have templates for these to make it very simple. Here's a question. Do you have a proper storefront integration? Monitors, HDX proxy. This is very thin ice you are walking on. You know what? Absolutely. I completely agree. When you're dealing with vendor-specific solutions, and when he says proper storefront integration, he's talking about Citrix Storefront, which is the front-end component, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, for the Citrix VDI solution for remote access for virtual desktop infrastructure. And we have full storefront integration where you can do what you wanted to do with the Citrix ADC, formerly Netscaler, for Citrix storefront load balancing that you can do with Kemp. There are some pieces that are still coming, like the HDX proxy capability for HDX streaming is not quite there yet, but it is coming. There are pieces that are coming, but the general rule of thumb is most of the customers are not using HDX proxy. There are some that are, obviously, but most of the customers aren't. And for the ones that aren't, this is a very viable solution today. And in the very near future, it'll be supported. So the answer is, if you're using Citrix Storefront, absolutely, you do not have to use Citrix ADC. And Kemp is not the only vendor that supports this, but Kemp does support Citrix Storefront integration, so you do not have to stay with that Citrix ADC solution if you're not interested in moving forward. Any referential projects in terms of migrating from Citrix ADC to Kemp? Especially interested in the number of man hours given for migration to give us somewhat of a referral point for offers. And the answer is yes. There are multiple situations. If you go to that link that I put on the end of the presentation, kemp.ax/binge/Citrix, you'll see some use cases, customer cases, where we talk about customers, such as Midcoast Council in Australia, which is a large 5 data center location in Australia for local government, where they replace Citrix with Kemp. Or there's other other examples within this location on our site to give you examples of migrations from Citrix Netscaler, Citrix ADC to Kemp. And if you want more details, you can certainly get in touch with the sales team that are involved in those projects, and then give you more details that you may not see through the website in terms of hours of migration and how easy it was, and get customer references and things like that. So here's a question, and this is a great question. Does the downloaded version come with additional features such as WAF, for example? And the answer is absolutely. So the downloaded version, whether there's a trial version or we actually have a free version at freeloadbalancer.com for very, very small or trial installations, it is full featured. You have basically all the capabilities: the web application firewall, edge authentication for single sign-on, two-factor authentication, full layer 7 content switching is all available. And by the way, if you do the trial, which is a 30-day trial by default, you can extend it through our sales organization if you need to. That trial comes with full 24/7, 365 support from our world-class support engineers. So if you have a question in terms of configuration, design, I don't know what I'm doing, call us and we'll fix it for you. We'll work with you to fix it. So here's a great question. We use two-factor authentication for external access through our Citrix ADC. Does Kemp support two-factor authentication for external access via a workspace into our storefront? Absolutely. So and two-factor authentication can be token authentication using RSA tokens or other versions of tokens, SMS tokens. There are multiple ways to do it, but absolutely two-factor authentication, single sign-on capabilities are available through the Kemp solution for Citrix. So a lot of these questions that I see here are basically saying, can I do what I was doing with Citrix ADC with the Kemp solution? And 98% of the time, the answer is absolutely. Absolutely. There's no reason that you couldn't. ADC, load balancing technology, is fairly mature. And in general, we're going to be able to at least do everything that everybody else can do, comparing Kemp versus Citrix and everybody else. So the general rule of thumb is assume it does unless somebody tells you it doesn't. So, I mean, again, a lot of these questions are kind of related to that. Working with Parallels, remote access services, absolutely. Parallels, we actually have a partnership where we're doing things with Kemp to make sure that we are fully integrated into the Parallel solution. So that's not quite Citrix related, but if you're using Citrix or thinking about Citrix ADC to load balance Parallels, Kemp might be a better solution. Just putting it out there. Is the Kemp Azure solution 100% the same as the one we have now on-prem, WAF, and so on? Like I mentioned earlier, yes. The software is the same. The functionality is the same, no matter where the form factor exists. Whether you're hardware, software, on-prem, virtual, public cloud, the Kemp solution looks and feels the same. The configuration menu, the user interface, the functionality is going to be identical. So here's a good question that's slightly more for the US. What type of DoD accreditations, and I can't speak today, do you adhere to, as well as DoD past performance? So when we say DoD, we're talking about the US Department of Defense, which has a lot of standards and accreditations and certifications. And Kemp applies many of the things that it does into these certification programs. So for example, we're going through and finishing the common criteria, the CC certifications. We are doing the USG IPv6 certifications and going through that process. There's a lot of other pieces that we have, but a lot of this can be answered offline with our federal team. And the reason I bring this up and answer this question in this presentation is because a lot of the US DoD standards get applied or asked for from other organizations around the world. I hear about companies in Singapore wanting to fit US DoD certifications criteria because they are so stringent. So having those stringent certifications becomes important for things globally as well. So yes, We do a lot of certifications with DoD. We do a lot of work with DoD, and this translates us to having a better solution and more secure and more robust solution for the general population as well. So I strongly recommend us taking a look into that and taking advantage of that. So I think I'm running out of time here. I love the questions. If I did not answer your question specifically in this session, we will follow up with you afterwards and answer it directly. And we will look forward to seeing you on a new session with Kemp in terms of our broadcasts. And I look forward to talking about more interesting topics and maybe even controversial topics, and seeing what we can do to help you with your load balancing technology, your other technology needs, and what Kemp does in that world, and just technology in general, because it's very exciting. Again, thank you for joining this Kemp presentation on understanding the 5 reasons to replace Citrix ADC with Kemp. And again, I look forward to seeing you on a future presentation through Bright Talk or other channels with Kemp Technologies. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you soon.